Linda Thorson, and I'm here to show those of you who feel that teaching fractions is a very difficult task, because often students will say learning fractions is one of the most difficult things that they've ever had to do. And so I'm going to show you some ways that you can introduce the students to fractions. We're going to move from fractions into decimals and then into percents, because they're really all the same thing. I think the importance for teaching this together is because students need to understand in everyday life that a part of something can be shown in a variety of ways. And they need to understand that it's relevant to their everyday life. For example, they use money all the time, and they know that when you have a $20 bill, half of a $20 bill is $10. So you would say 10 20ths is 1/2. Then you could go with 2 5s. And 2 5s is half of 10. So you would show that, for example, if we took the 2 5s, 5 plus 5 over 20 out of 20 is the same thing as 10 out of 20. And then you can use dollars and cents and so on, and they realize that half a dollar is 50 cents. A quarter of a dollar is a quarter. And it's really good to have the actual money photocopied so that they can see that this is a toonie, this is a loonie, a quarter, a dime, and a nickel. And then you can do pennies as well. But you can show them the fractions this way with the money. And then you look at it and you say, well, what percent? And most of them will be able to tell you that a $10 bill is 50% of a $20 bill. And so then you're coming to bring them to the realization that a half and 50% are the same thing. And so I think that teaching them together after they're introduced to fractions and understand the sizes of fractions, that it's a great follow-up to go on to percent and then decimals as well. Because they need to understand that decimal 50 is simply a decimal point in front of two numbers in the percent and taking away the percent. So then they'll realize that, well, if you can do that to some fractions, we know that 3/4, if you have 3/4 of a dollar, so that's a dollar, and you have 3/4 of that dollar, how much of that dollar would that be? Well, one of these is 25%, two of them is 25%, three of them is 25%, all of them together make 75%, which is the same thing as decimal 75, because you have 75 cents. And so it's like saying decimal 25 plus decimal 25 plus decimal 25 is decimal 75. Now there are lots of tools you can use to teach this. One of the tools that I find very handy, not very sophisticated but very inexpensive, is to take a ruler. You can use the actual numbers on the ruler, but what I do is I get the students to put a paper on there, sometimes the whole ruler, sometimes just part of it. We use the ruler because it is a solid piece, and also because later on we'll start using the ruler and using fractions by measuring. So here I have a white paper put on here, and I've divided this paper into 8 parts. So we have 8/8. So here we have 1/2, which is really 4/8. And although you probably can't see it on the camera, I'll show you what that looks like. It's the same thing as using the number line again. And because you've already talked about the number line and they're familiar with it, it will be comfortable for them. So we then show that that's 4/8, that's 2/8, that's 6/8. And so once we've been talking about percents and decimals, then we can literally put them in there like this. Decimal 50 and 50%. And so on. And then here we would put 100%, which is 1, which is a whole thing. 1.00 is probably the best way to show that. And then this will be decimal 75 and 75%. And then you could do that with all of the numbers. It's best, though, to stick to numbers that are going to be even numbers, particularly starting off. And students don't need to understand how to change fractions, decimals, and percent until after they really understand the concept of decimals, fractions, and percent. So it's handy to have this. They can have this marked, and it has the decimal, the percent, and the fraction right there, and they can look at it. So it makes them comfortable that they have something of their own that has that information. Something else that's very useful is these cubes. And these cubes, for example, this one shows 100%. This one shows 25%. And the thing is, as you turn it, you will see, and also there are 4 of them, obviously. 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. And so they have the decimal, the fraction, and the percent on the whole thing. And so they're showing that 100% is equal to 1. So these are wonderful tools for the students to use. As well, there's a book. This is one in a series, which is marvelous. Something that is great for teaching students fractions to begin with, and it's part of the curriculum for the Adult Learning Program Level 2, and David Pilmer is the author of this, and it's called Focus on Fractions, and it's excellent. So I would suggest you certainly try to get hold of that. Any of the learning networks would have those available. This book is called Split It Up, and it specifically focuses on fractions, decimals, and percents. And the publisher of this is Key Curriculum Press. And if you just www.keypress.com, you'll be able to find a series of these books, and they're wonderful tools. Anyway, I hope this has taken away some of your inhibitions about teaching fractions. I'm sure your students will be very comfortable with it. And certainly go to any of your teachers, and they will provide you with tools as well, or tell you how to get some of these tools. Thank you.